Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back. We hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Maybe some warmer weather. I don't know. I know lots of places had a few days, at least this week, which is like a month from when you're hearing this. So hopefully by the time you're hearing this, there are several days of warm weather. That would be really nice.
Yeah, you're going to hear us talking about the nice weather, and like another snowstorm's going to come through, and everyone's going to be like, shut up!
Like, no, Jaclyn and Courtney, we don't have nice weather. We have 4 inches of snow. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, well, it was just enough. Hopefully things are getting warmer. Hopefully we're getting towards summer. I'm a little sick of the cold.
We're moving there. I got to take my laptop outside and work on my deck for a couple of hours this week, so that was exciting. The sun is setting just a little bit later. We're not quite to the time jump yet, but it's getting there, and then pretty soon we'll have a whole extra hour of daylight at the end of the day, which always makes me so happy because nothing makes me sadder than a 5 o'clock sunset.
Yeah, that's always the worst when you're just like, it's so dark. I got off work and now it's dark. This is depressing.
Yeah. It's so depressing. Like, it's like the day is over already.
Hopefully, brighter days are ahead, and hopefully not only weather-wise, but hopefully, we get this vaccine out, and hopefully we can go places and, all that. I was just thinking, and I was like, I'm just thinking about all those days, all those weeks before COVID when I only worked 40 hours and I could go places and I could go to restaurants, and man, do I miss that. Man, I took advantage of that.
Just
let me tell you,
new world. It really was
I'll never take advantage of it again.
I mean, really, just thinking about like something minor. Like today, Andrew and I were out driving around, and I was like, man, a year ago at this time, we were out doing like political canvassing and like knocking on strangers' doors and having face-to-face conversations with them, and no idea that like in a few weeks everything would be completely different.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, especially on Facebook, share, like, this was a year ago, right before, like, everything shut down. Like, it's just crazy.
It is. But like you said, hopefully, I mean, numbers are, knock on wood, starting to improve in places. Vaccine numbers are going up. I've seen a lot of people personally getting their vaccines, so that's good. So yeah, I have high hopes. Hopefully that won't be ruined.
Lord knows I need a brighter future. So it's been real. It's been a real year. Let's hope it's in the past for the most part.
Yes.
And speaking of bummers, we have kind of a bummer case today, which they're all kind of bummers, but it's a sad one.
It is. Very much so.
So this one was a listener suggestion who did have like a close connection, I guess, to the case, and I had never heard of it, and so it was very interesting to go ahead and deep dive into it. So today we are covering the disappearance of Theresa Parker, and most of our information comes from a 48 Hours Mystery episode. That one had a lot of good details, a lot of family interviews, all that, and then we also used 2 Northwest Georgia News articles and a Times Free Press article. So most of this takes place in LaFayette, Georgia, which is like a small town located in Walker County. It's kind of close to the Georgia-Tennessee border. It's right in the heart of the Bible Belt. If anyone knows, in the South, you're right there in the Bible Belt. It is a very, very small town. Everything's close together. Everyone knows everyone, so that comes into play. So I can't exactly find too many details about Theresa Parker's early life, but I do know that she was the middle child of 3. She was very big about family, and she just loved everyone, loved family. She was a really big people person. She was also a 911 dispatcher, and her nickname was Mother Teresa, just because she was just such a nice, wonderful person, which is always how it is. She was really the glue that held the family together, and if you ever needed her, she was right there. And Theresa's first marriage had ended in divorce, but soon after she became a 911 dispatcher, she met a man named Sam Parker. So Sam Parker had been in the Marine Corps, and his brother Kenneth said that being a cop to him was everything. So he was just a cop 24/7. He was a cop, and his life was that he was a cop. And Sam was attracted to Theresa as soon as he met her, and he talked a lot about the new 911 dispatcher who was very pretty. His brother in the episode talked a lot he just talked about her nonstop, once she started working there. And he eventually asked her out, and they started dating. They did interview Sam in the 48 Hours episode, and they asked what he first noticed about her, and he only said, thin. So the interviewer, who's a woman, is so she was just super skinny, and he was like, for around here, yeah.
Double ew. You're disgusting.
So, yeah, that was very telling to me because this interview does take place after she disappears. So I'm really hoping if I disappear, Kevin won't go on and be like, I noticed her big old boobs. It's the first thing I noticed about her. Maybe not.
Yeah, I would really hope that you would have something more substantial to say about your wife, especially in light of her recent disappearance. That's not usually the direction those questions go in.
Yeah. Sam also had 2 ex-wives, and despite their previous failed relationships, they really did seem like a good match and got along really well. So Theresa's sister Christina said that she liked him, and when they first started dating, that he was funny and a gentleman. And Christina said she really thought he was the one for Theresa because Theresa was crazy about him, and they were just crazy about each other. And Theresa and Sam did get married on September 11th, 1993. They were very happy at first, but after a few years, their relationship turned a little rocky. So they'd be fighting one moment and in love with each other the next. And Kenneth, who is Sam's brother, said it seemed like they liked it this way. They almost liked fighting, and I've known couples like that, and they normally don't last. But, they live for the whole fighting, all that. But apparently not necessarily so, because eventually Theresa did have enough, and she filed for divorce after 13 years of them being married. And Sam did say there was really no bad blood between them, that it was just kind of, this relationship isn't working, we're just going to end it.
Mm-hmm.
So on March 21st, 2007, it was the first day of spring, and so as we were talking earlier about spring, I'm sure everyone was super happy with their warmer weather, longer days.
Yes.
So Christina said Theresa was at her house. It was for about an hour, and they talked about Theresa's new place. She had just gotten a new apartment, and how she wanted her to come see it. And she was really, really excited because this apartment was close to her sister and her nephews. And so she was excited to be closer and, spend time with them. And when they went to hug bye, Christina just said she had this really strange, empty feeling. And she was like, for some reason, I just had this feeling like I wouldn't see her again. And she's like, I have no, basis for why I felt this, but it was just odd.
I feel like we hear that a lot with disappearances. The family members are even though there was nothing to suspect beforehand, that last interaction, something just felt different,
Yeah, it was that way with a lot of the Green River killer victims, how the parents were like, something I just knew. So they didn't really talk the next day, but Christina figured, Theresa's just cleaning up her new place. She's, moving stuff, organizing, all that. But by Friday, March 23rd, the empty feeling in her gut was back, and she became worried. And she said that she woke up and she just felt like she had this black cloud over her, which was pretty unusual for her. And so she was like, I just want to talk to Theresa because she's, the one I can always go to. She makes me feel better. She'll help me, get through this little rut I'm in. And Theresa didn't pick up her phone. So Christina went ahead to work and hoped Theresa would call her back, but it was odd because it was taking a really long time, and usually Theresa called back very quickly. At the same time, Theresa's coworker and friend Rhonda Knox was also getting worried after a strange call early on Thursday. So at 6 a.m., Rhonda received a call from Theresa, but there was just a few seconds of silence and then a hang-up. This is also the day of flip phones, it's a little harder to butt dial people.
Yeah.
So she said it was very odd for her to call and hang up, and she was like, I just had a feeling maybe it wasn't Theresa who was calling me. Mm-hmm. So she called her back and she didn't get an answer, and then she also called the house phone because she was starting to get worried. So to ease her mind, she called Shane Green, who was a friend and also an officer, and asked him to just go check out the home that Theresa and Sam still shared. So at around 6:30 a.m., Shane went to the house and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. So Rhonda was like, well, check in the garage because she always parks in the garage. So he did, and her car was not there, but Sam's patrol car was in the garage, and his pickup truck was parked outside of the house. And multiple people saw this, and it was in plain sight. Just remember that. It comes back up. So then on Thursday evening, Theresa's car was back at the house in the garage, but no one had seen her, and she still wasn't answering her cell phone. So everyone was calling her, and the 48 Hours episode even played several of the voicemails people left of just being like, hey, Theresa, it's me, like, getting worried. Can you call me back? Like, hello, where are you? And even Sam tried to call her and had left a voicemail as well. And now, more than 24 hours had gone by with no word from Theresa. So also on March 23rd, Christina had gotten a call from Sam, and he was on patrol working the night shift. So she could tell something was off because he just kept talking really fast and kept clearing his throat, and he was just acting really out of character. And she was saying that she thought they needed to file a missing persons report because something was wrong and this just wasn't Theresa. So Sam then tells Christina that he'd gone fishing with a friend Thursday morning, and when he left, her car had been in the garage, which is kind of weird to just be like, well, maybe not. Maybe you're just being like, she was there when I left, but also you're giving a very specific reason of why you weren't there. So Christina kept voicing her concerns, and he told her, I'm at work, but when I get off, I will see what I can do. But you're also a cop, so...
Yeah, like I feel like anywhere that you're working, if your ex-wife has been missing for over a day, most people are understanding, but especially so if you're a police officer. I feel like you could incorporate that into your workday somehow.
Yeah. And while he said this, Theresa's mom is the one who ended up filing the missing persons report the next morning on Saturday, March 24th. So a detective was assigned to the case, but the detective felt too close to the case to investigate it. He'd gone to the academy with Sam, and Theresa was a 911 dispatcher, so she worked closely with all of these officers. You know, it's a small town, like, all these people really know each other. So they made a decision to call in the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, which I thought was amazing. Like, the same day a missing person report is filed and you know everyone's too close, like, you immediately call in GBI. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, like, that never happens. Like, we see the exact opposite where they're too close to the case and shouldn't be investigating, but they do, and then that's when things get missed, and it's just a really poor investigation. But this officer had, like, the foresight to say, okay, this isn't appropriate, let me call in someone else to help. So good for you.
Yeah. So they called them at about 5 p.m. on that Saturday, and Special Agent James Harris drove straight to Theresa's new apartment to look around for any clues. So he said he did find some clothes and shoes. She was still in the process of moving, so it wasn't a lot of stuff there. She had purchased a washer and dryer from Lowe's that was supposed to be delivered, but she wasn't there to get it, and they had left a little flyer on the door that said they had been there. So James Harris was wanting to talk to Sam very soon because, I mean, who's always the first suspect? Come on now, y'all. So he was interviewed on March 25th. So James Harris, first really wanted to get Sam to just establish his timeline leading up to her disappearance. And one thing that stood out in his interview was that Sam told him he was in his truck all night. But as I said before, multiple people had seen Sam's truck in front of their house, and 3 people had already told the agent that they had seen his truck in front of the house.
Yeah, so that information was present before he tried to claim that. Yeah.
So red flags start going up immediately because, why would you lie about something so small? And this isn't they're interviewing you weeks later. This is a few days ago. So it's pretty odd.
And you were very specific about where you were at a specific time with her sister when you were talking about going fishing. So it's you knew what was up that day. It's not like, oh, I have no concept of time. I don't know where I was or what I was doing. My bad.
Yeah, and he did say in an interview, I have nothing to hide and nothing to lie about. So, one of the hardest things investigators did face during this search was just the terrain. So, across from the Parker home is just miles of wooded areas. This is kind of small town Georgia. We're in the mountains here. Like, it's rocky terrain for sure. And it could be really easy to hide something in those woods and no one ever find it. And there's also hundreds of old wells in the area. So this also kind of made investigators more suspicious of Sam because he did grow up in these areas, so he knew these things were here. He possibly knew where the old wells were or, how to get around the woods. He'd also made jokes before Theresa went missing that he could use his information of, the woods and the ponds and all that to do pretty awful things. So that's weird. And he had talked before to multiple people that he knew how to hide a body and no one would ever find it. And he talked about putting it in the pond and letting the turtles eat it.
That's oddly specific, and I think that might be a red flag.
Yeah, especially as someone who grew up hunting in these woods and fishing in the ponds, and all these areas, and you're suddenly like, this place I spend all my time at, I know exactly what to do with this space and how to hide these bodies.
And I feel like also being a police officer, you should know that those statements could be used against you in the future if anything were to ever happen.
And it's odd too, but people do all the time now joke about well, I know how to hide a body. I wouldn't get caught. This is what you do. I hear people say that, so I guess it depends too on the whole situation, but it is very, very specific and odd.
Yeah.
So
and especially combined with everything else. One of those situations where, oh, well, if that was the only thing going on, it might be different. But when you look at everything combined together, you're like, we got lots of red flags going on.
Yeah. And law enforcement and volunteers searched the woods fingertip to fingertip. And a lot of people really came out to help look for her. And they did search 175 square miles. And they did end up draining and searching many ponds. And they even went through the local landfills. And authorities searched the Parkers' home 5 times. So they confiscated a bunch of old guns and rifles, but they didn't believe they had any involvement in Theresa's disappearance. And Sam complained about these searches, saying they didn't go in and look at her closets or her personal items. They only looked at him. They were only trying to find evidence against him.
Mm-hmm.
So law enforcement next turned to bringing in dogs, and they did provide them with a scent off of Sam's clothes and his patrol car. So they ran and detected certain areas that led police to believe he'd been in this area. I don't really know how suspicious that is. If he maybe was fishing, it is common you might be in this area. It's not really, your nail in the coffin, your damning evidence that you want it to be.
Yeah.
So they did try and look into other suspects, but ultimately, every time they looked at the evidence, it just led them back to Sam Parker. And one investigator said that Sam appeared to have, to him to just be, cold and meticulous. Even as a police officer, his uniform was always perfect. His patrol car was always perfect. Very, very meticulous man. Sam told investigators he had last seen and heard from Theresa at 7:30 on Wednesday evening when she was loading up her car to move things to her new apartment. But phone records showed that Sam had tried to call Theresa multiple times early Thursday morning, and he had denied that he ever made these calls, which is weird because you're a police officer and they can pull records and prove that you called her.
And why would that be something that you would lie about if you were innocent? Because if you were innocent, you think that would help prove your case because you're like, oh, I tried to get a hold of her Thursday morning. I had no idea that something was wrong. And also, he left her voicemails. You think that's not going to be retrieved?
I don't know what Sam was thinking. We'll see that going forward. We don't know what he's thinking. So the forensic investigator then looked at Theresa's car and found blood, and the back of the 4Runner also had vacuum marks showing that someone had recently vacuumed it. So DNA results came back and did confirm that Teresa's blood and Sam's DNA were found in the back of the 4Runner. So investigators now had enough to make an arrest, so they did go arrest him, and the only thing he said when being arrested was asking an investigator to turn off his coffee pot.
Again, cold and meticulous.
Yeah. So nearly 1 year after Theresa disappeared, Sam Parker was arrested for her murder, and at this point, Teresa's body had not been found, and only the only evidence was her blood found in the back of the car, which could really easily be explained away. It is her car, like his DNA being in the car. I mean, it's her husband. You know, it's not. It can easily. You can get some pretty good reasonable doubt with this.
Yeah, it's not like super damning evidence of like a stranger's DNA in your car. Like you would expect like your ex-husband's DNA to be in your car. But one thing that I did like stand out to me with this is she was in the process of moving. So like why would she have vacuumed out her car if she's still like moving things? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like your car is going to get dirty in the process of moving. So that's something that you do like when you're done moving, not when you're in the middle of moving. So that is suspicious, but not anything close to like evidence that would hold up in court.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any research into vacuuming cars, like how long after vacuuming a car like vacuum marks stay. You know, like I don't really know anything. I don't think anyone knows evidence about that unless you're testing it, but
I thought you were going to say that there's never been any research to like people's behaviors of vacuuming when they're moving. And I was like, that would be a weirdly specific research study.
I mean, both of those would be weirdly specific. So the week before Theresa disappeared, she had visited the Smoky Mountains. So she spent 3 days in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and it was supposed to be like a little getaway before her move. So Theresa had made a reservation at her favorite cabin, and she told Christina she just wanted to be by herself and clear her mind because she'd just been really, really stressed. So Sam knew she was going on this trip and even gave her money for shopping, but something about this trip just really troubled him. So he decided to abuse his power as a police officer and start investigating. And Sam called the lodge and convinced them to give him like her reservation details. So she had registered under the name Theresa Parker, but I also don't know if this was just clerical error because Parker, I mean, it's pretty close.
That's what I thought too when I was reading that. Because I'm like, if you just called and made a reservation over the phone, the person taking it could have easily heard Barker instead of Parker. Like, that's not a great alias or something. Yeah.
So Sam was convinced that Theresa had cheated on him on this Gatlinburg trip, even though they were getting divorced. And however, there was just really no evidence that anyone was there with Theresa. Like, he just kind of made this up in his head. So Christina is also very adamant that she was alone. But Sam's suspicions grew when he saw on the registration that she listed there would be 2 adults, which I feel like most times when I make reservations now, like 1 isn't even really an option. Like it's just 2 standard. And I mean, also just because you're alone, like doesn't mean someone might not come and see you also. Like, hey, I want to leave it open in case somebody does want to come with me or just say hi or whatever.
Because that's the thing, like, when she booked it, she may have been like, oh, like, maybe my sister or a friend, like, will want to go with me, or maybe I'll just go by myself, I don't know. Or, like you said, like, you just call and book a 1-bedroom cabin, and they're just like, oh, 2 adults, because that's just the norm.
Yeah. And so Shane Green, who was the officer from earlier, had stated that he was invited to go with her, but he did decline. And Kenneth, who again is Sam's brother, just really believes there's no way that Shane and Theresa only had a platonic relationship, and there was clearly something going on. So Sam's defense attorney, David Dunn, is really, really harping on this and saying clearly somebody was there. I mean, clearly, like, she changed her name and put 2 adults, like, oh.
It's obvious from this evidence.
Even though he knew exactly what cabin she was staying at, knew she was going on this trip. Like, it's very, very odd. And the prosecutor, Lee Patterson, is just saying there's absolutely no evidence anyone was there with her. And Shane's phone records did ping nowhere near Gatlinburg. And Shane also says he was nowhere near there, and he was never romantically involved with Theresa. So they're just trying to come up with a story, and, oh, she was having an affair even though they're getting divorced. and being separated. She's having an affair with this guy. And, oh, how scandalous. Like, she's a 41-year-old woman. I think she can do whatever she wants.
And for, like, no reason other than there were 2 adults listed on the reservation and you think he was there. Like, that's your only reasoning for thinking that he was there, that she was having this affair.
And his phone wasn't even pinging in the area, which is a travel, too. It's not like, oh, well, it said he's in the town over. Like, no, like he's far away.
Yeah, like he wasn't there. So Lee Patterson says that Sam was a controlling, manipulative person and that all of his jealousy was made up in his head. And according to the prosecution, Theresa was dealing with a very abusive husband and she had just had enough when she filed for divorce. And Christina believed that she had just had it from everyone. Even Sam's brother Kenneth said that he could drink a lot and would often drink too much. He did say that he was a happy drunk, but Christina had a different story. And she said that when he drank too much, he became very mean and violent. And she even said that he would keep a water bottle of straight vodka in the refrigerator at family dinners and then sneak over and drink from it. So that's a big sign that something is not right there.
Yeah, that's like this number one sign of like an alcoholic is like they have vodka in a water bottle, I swear.
Yeah, especially if you're like, oh, I can't even get through this family dinner without sneaking off to drink my vodka from this water bottle.
Especially because, I mean, like, at my family dinners, like, I can openly drink. It's not a secret.
Exactly. Like, something odd there. So Christina also said that Sam could change from nice to mean in a minute, which we see often with alcoholics. And she said that one night Theresa and Sam went out to eat and he started drinking too much. So Theresa left the restaurant and in the car, Sam started threatening her, took out his gun and started shooting in the parking lot. So Theresa called 911, but when police arrived, they didn't arrest Sam. They took him to a hospital for a psychological evaluation. And Christina said that Theresa didn't leave then because she really loved Sam and she had hope that things would get better, that he would change, like you always do. But in what other circumstance can someone just go shooting a gun in a parking lot and not get arrested? Like,
that's what I was thinking. Like, when they started telling this story, and I'm like, how was he not in jail? And then they were like, they just took him for a psychological evaluation. I'm like, are you kidding me? Can you imagine if this was like a black man in a domestic assault case? Like, that's not the case. That's not what would happen. And also, like, I'm just baffled. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but like, my goodness.
And like, what did your psychological evaluation show? Like, if it showed that there was mental illness, you think he would be required to get help, and if it showed that there was not, then he would then be arrested. Like, that's usually how that works. It's not like a free pass kind of situation. So Sam Parker's second wife, Keila Beard, said that she knows these circumstances all too well. So they were married for 4 years, and she told a story when Sam threw a glass of water on the ground and broke it, then grabbed her by the hair at the back of the head and drug her across the room. So he did drag her feet through the broken glass, so they were bleeding, and then he pulled out his handcuffs and handcuffed her to the bed. So he eventually let her go, but only because he had to go back to work. And Keila said when he abused her a few months later, he gave her a warning. He said that she better not tell anyone what he did or he would kill her. And he said, you can believe me that I know how to do it without getting caught and they won't ever find your body. So neither Keila nor Theresa ever filed a police report about his abuse, which obviously is common because he's a police officer. So we know what they do to protect their own, and we know that that can just put them in more danger by giving this report that then they just go to Sam and they're like, oh, look, did you see what your wife said? Like, oh my gosh, I get whatever. And then he goes home to you and nothing ever happens, and then you're in more danger than you were before. So I completely understand why neither of them would report this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that happens really, really often. And that was a narrative brought up a lot once, like, the Blue Lives Matter movement kind of came out. Especially as, like, okay, but what about these officers' wives who are literally getting abused and can't do anything because who do you go to?
Yes.
And even if you know, most of the times you're not going to report it because you're like, who's going to believe me? Or he has threatened me with all this stuff and can probably do it. And also, like, if you do report it, you might just be, like, dismissed, you know? Like, I mean, cops can kill random people in the streets and get off. Like, why would they care about you beating your wife? Like,
Yup. And I think especially the fact that this is such a small town plays into that as well, because it's not like somewhere that's larger where you would have a chance of speaking to someone who didn't know him, where you would maybe get a more non-biased response. Like anyone that you report this to is likely in a close relationship with Sam, so that just plays even more into the small town and the dangers for them.
And also, too, like, she's a 911 dispatcher, so she knows all the officers, too. So
Yeah.
then if you do come forward with that, like, everyone you eventually talk to, like, knows what you came forward with, and, like, it's just very, very complicated.
Yeah, definitely. So Sam's brother Kenneth doubts that the abuse was ever this bad. Of course, says Kenneth, the brother, who is also a police officer, FYI.
And, like, they talked about how much Kenneth, like, idolized Sam. Like, Kenneth went into the Marine Corps because Sam went into the Marine Corps. Kenneth became, like, a police officer because Sam became a police officer. Like, I get it. Like, I love my sister so much, but, like, he is, like, Sam is on a pedestal to him.
Yeah, he could never do anything wrong. No way he beat his wives. He said that he does not believe that Sam was ever physically abusive to Theresa, but that they were both mentally abusive to each other. Again, I feel like we hear this a lot. He said that they liked to play mind games, and Theresa always knew what button to push if she wanted to fight. And Kenneth said that Sam is just simply misunderstood and not a killer. And he is convinced that Theresa is still alive in either Mexico or California at this point.
Yeah, and I really felt like he was just like, oh, well, if they were fighting, it's because Theresa started it.
Yeah.
And, like, he was one of the ones pushing, like, the narrative of, like, oh, Sam and Theresa, they just loved fighting, and they loved it. And it's just what, it was their thing. How cutesy. And it's like, I think you're seeing this with some, like, rose-colored glasses here.
Yeah, like, you think that your brother could do no wrong, so instead of your brother being an abusive asshole, they must just be in a mutually toxic relationship where they like to fight and do those sorts of things. And if something happened to Theresa, obviously she started it. Like, she must have made Sam mad enough to do something.
Yeah.
So Sam had his own theory of where Theresa was, and he told investigators that she was in Mexico with a guy named Elvis.
Yes, I laughed so hard. Right. When it said this, I just laughed because I was like, is it Elvis Presley? Is Elvis Presley alive?
That's where he went. I mean, we all know Elvis Presley's alive, so that's where
he's alive in Mexico with Theresa Parker.
So Theresa had vacationed in Mexico with her nieces, and at the resort, they had met an entertainer named Elvis. Okay, sounds legit. So they followed up on this hunch and went to Cancun to see what was going on there. So investigator with GBI, James Harris, said that there was 100% chance that Elvis and Theresa were not there. He even commented that he was trying not to laugh when discussing this theory and that it's just a bogus theory. Like, she was moving closer to her family and wanted to be with them more. Like, she just got in a new apartment. Why was she going to run away to Mexico without telling anyone? Like, It's just absurd. So the trial was starting soon for Sam Parker, and this would be a difficult one because there's no body, no crime scene, and no murder weapon. So Lee Patterson says she wishes she had everything, but unfortunately that's not how cases work. So while they didn't have a lot of forensics, they did have a lot of other circumstantial evidence. So no body cases are rare, and in Georgia there'd only been about 4 in the last 200 years, so that's pretty crazy. So the prosecution called many witnesses who testified about Sam's violence and his abusive behavior, and the prosecutors laid out their theory as to what happened. So they believe that Theresa was leaving her new apartment and driving to the home that she shared with Sam. So she didn't think that he would be there, but he was waiting there for her. They believe that sometime between 12:30 and 1:30 a.m. on March 22nd, 2007, Sam killed Theresa. The prosecution claimed that after he killed her, he put her body in the back of her car, then left in his car and went to a woman named Christy Bellaflower's house for a date. So Christy testified in court that when Sam showed up to her house, he had vodka in a water bottle with him that he was drinking. And the prosecution believes that this date was just to establish an alibi for the night.
Which is a very, very late date.
Yeah. Like...
You're showing up at like 2 a.m.
And it was during the week too, right?
Yeah, it was on a Wednesday, which he did work night shift, so maybe his body was just accustomed to this. but still very weird.
Well, what's Christy doing?
I don't know.
No, I'm sleeping at 2 a.m. You ain't coming over here for a date with your vodka water bottle at 2 a.m., sir. So the prosecution believes that after the date, he drove home, and then sometime between 5:30 and 7, he drove off in Theresa's car and dumped her body. So the defense argued that this scenario is ludicrous. They said that murder is messy and that it's almost impossible to leave no evidence. And in response to the blood in her car, the defense says that there was no way to tell how old that blood was or when it was put there, which is true. But then the prosecution called a surprise witness, fellow police officer Ben Chaffin. So he was very close to Sam and even considered him like a big brother, and he had seen him and Theresa fighting. And so he would give one of the biggest testimonies because he testified about a phone call that occurred the night Theresa disappeared. So Sam said that he had really done it this time or was really going to do it this time, and he said he had a plan and they'd never find her. Ben also testified that Sam said he had shot Theresa through the head. And then a few minutes later, he called back and said if he told anyone, he'd have to kill him too. So while this was a huge testimony, it turns out that Ben had given investigators 5 different stories, and he had been arrested for helping Sam hack into Theresa's computer. So the prosecution gave him immunity in exchange for his testimony.
Which I feel like, why? You know this is going to come out. You know
Exactly.
It's going to come out. Like,
again, with these police officers, like, y'all know how this works. Like,
Yeah.
You're not some, like, layperson on the street that doesn't understand this.
I thought it was a very bold move by the prosecution to bring that.
Right?
Sure.
I don't understand. So, of course, the defense, David Dunn, is just going to jump all over this. And in the first testimony Ben gave to investigators, he did not mention this call because he had forgotten about it. You know, I'm pretty forgetful, especially these days with pregnancy brain. But if someone called me and they were like, I did it, I'm going to do it, I shot my wife in the head, I'm going to kill you too, that would stick with me. I would not forget that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
I wouldn't forget it at all. It's pretty memorable.
So Lee Patterson believes that he didn't forget, but was trying to protect Sam since they were so close. That I believe much more.
Yeah, that's way more reasonable.
But Ben was not very believable, and so 48 Hours interviewed the jury, and none of them said that they found Ben believable or credible, and they just didn't put much weight on the blood found in the car either. So they thought that it was circumstantial, and it was just like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, like there was nothing clear here. So the cause of death was not known because Theresa's body had not been found, but bruises on Sam's arm could give some clues. So Sam was known to abuse chokeholds. Again, just so many common things in this case that we see all the time.
Yep.
So investigators believe that Sam put Theresa in a chokehold and she fought back with her hands, and that's what left the bruises on his arm that look like small dots, like they could have been fingers. But of course the defense does not believe that they were from a fight with Theresa, but the prosecution even gave a demonstration in court to show the chokehold and how Theresa could have fought back. So there was one more strong piece of evidence that was presented to the jury. So a poster was found in Sam's work locker that showed a picture of an abused woman with a black eye and a busted lip that said, "This bitch didn't know when to shut up, do you?"
And it's bad. Like, when I was watching this, like, I told Kevin about it, and he was like, oh, yeah. And then I showed him, and he was like, ooh, that's bad. Like, it's this woman with, you know, completely looking abused. Like, it looks like a meme. And I'm like, who thinks this is funny?
I just don't understand. What? So the defense claims that he was just given this and just threw it in his locker and, you know, didn't even know it was in there. And it wasn't even acknowledged until the searches. And he's like, it means nothing. I don't even know what,
No,
sir?
I'm sorry.
Who gave it to you?
As a police officer, if you see this, you should be like, this is fucking disgusting. Because
Exactly.
I see these women come in here who are abused and who have lifelong trauma. Like, that's not a fucking joke. And as a police officer, you should be the number one person who does not find that funny.
Definitely. Like, what are you doing? So the jury said this was an extremely daunting task for them to decide. So they had an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence, but not much more. So the first vote was 2-10, so 2 voted guilty and 10 were undecided. They said it got very heated in deliberation, and then after 3 days, the jury declared that they were deadlocked. One juror said that this was very difficult because you don't want to send an innocent man to jail or let a guilty man free to do it again.
Yeah, because you're like right there in the middle where you're like,
it's so hard.
Did he do it? Oh man, like it's tough.
Yeah, definitely. So the jury then decided to take a closer look at the cell phone evidence. So while looking at this, they could see that Sam's cell phone records showed that he was not where he was when he said he was. So on September 3rd, 2009, Sam Parker was found guilty of first-degree murder after the cell phone evidence kind of showed more of the lies that Sam had told.
Yeah, they were like, if he's going to lie about this, there's probably some other sneaky lies in there.
Yeah. So Sam Parker showed no emotion as the verdict was read, and then he was handed down the sentencing immediately of life in prison. So in September of 2010, Theresa Parker's remains were found and positively identified. They were found about 100 feet from the Chattooga River, which hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, off Fullerton Road in southern Chattooga County, approximately 25 miles from LaFayette. So a farmer searching for driftwood off Fullerton Road found a jawbone, and a further search of the area led to the recovery of other bones, including a skull that dental records did positively identify as Theresa Parker. So at this point, Sam had filed for a new trial, but it was unknown if he was told her remains had been found at this point. And it is worth noting that Sam grew up in Chattooga County, about 12 miles from where the remains were found. Again, he knows this area very, very well.
Yeah, these are the woods he's hunted in his whole life. I couldn't find their address at all online, and so it was kind of hard to determine exactly how far away it was, but seems pretty suspicious.
Yeah, like it definitely seemed like it was far enough away, but not super far, you know?
Yeah, like enough where you're like, I need to take this a little further out. Like,
yeah. So in October of 2010, GBI confirmed that Theresa Parker was a homicide victim, but the autopsy could not determine how she died. Her remains were out in the elements for 3.5 years, subjected to many circumstances, and a GBI spokesperson said that it was very rare to be able to determine cause of death when they've been out in the woods for so long. So earlier in the week, someone had released that there was a hole in the skull, but they said that they believed it was not a bullet hole. Investigators do not believe that the new findings will help Sam Parker in the appeal that he filed shortly after his conviction. So Sam Parker was appealing that the court made many errors, including that the judge admitted similar transaction evidence, which evidence that in this case showed a pattern of violent behavior. So this evidence was very damning because it showed a history of Sam's violent behavior and how he had acted with previous wives, but the High Court ruled that the similar evidence did have merit. So they believed that each piece of evidence shown was relevant to the case. So basically he's trying to claim that these previous bad acts were used against him, that they had nothing to do with this case, and they're like, no, it's a pattern of behavior that we can clearly demonstrate.
Yeah. You abuse one wife, you might easily abuse the next.
And that's the thing, too. It's not like you're on trial for some stranger's murder and they're like, oh, like this one time you got into a fight with someone. Like, you're on trial for, like, your ex-wife's murder, and it's like, oh, hey, you also abused your other ex-wives. Like, there's a pretty clear pattern here. Like, it makes sense.
And you're trying to also establish with this whole no body case that Sam was abusing Theresa throughout their marriage. So it's like, you know, you need to prove, like, okay, well, he's been abusive before. Like, it's very, you know, plausible.
So in November of 2014, the Georgia Supreme Court upheld Sam Parker's conviction, and he is currently serving his sentence in Long State Prison in South Georgia. So as far as we know, there have not been any updates in his appeals or anything since 2014. But, you know, I think we're all pretty sure that he did it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. The defense, I think I saw when they found her remains, were trying to be like, she just walked away. I don't think so.
He just walked away and died in the woods? That doesn't happen. Like, what?
Especially because she didn't really have any history of, you know, mental illness or depression, and she was very, very excited for her new life. Like,
yeah.
Come on now. I do find it very odd that he had 2 ex-wives and they kind of just got a divorce, but Theresa was killed. I find that very strange, but Yeah, it's just really heartbreaking and really sad. And just a life taken way too soon.
I know, it is such a super sad case, and especially because we said so many times throughout this episode, like, so many of these situations are so common. Like, we see this a lot with abusers in general, with police officers as abusers, with not being able to report your abuse for whatever reason, whether it is because you're married to a police officer or whatever the situation is, that reporting it will put you in even more danger if you don't have somewhere safe to go. Like, it's just super sad. And we don't know for sure that this was Sam, but I mean, he did have a long history of abusing her and his other wives. It's pretty likely, I mean, he was not good to her, even if he didn't murder her. But again, I mean, I personally feel pretty confident that he did murder her.
Especially with, like, when, like, her car was not there and his truck was clearly there.
Yeah.
And then her car comes back, but no one's heard from her. And it's pretty obvious that she's probably been murdered at this point. Like, I feel like that, to me, was also pretty big, strong evidence. And I feel like you should be like, oh, I did take her car. Like, come up with a story. You don't have to tell people how to murder. But, like, oh, I took her car. She was low on gas. So I was getting her, gas before work or something, like.
Like, clearly someone that was not Theresa drove that car. So.
And clearly his fishing story was a lie because he was with Christy.
Yeah.
So that's another lie. Like, if your wife goes missing, like, don't intentionally lie. Like, I understand maybe you might forget things incorrectly or be like, oh, hey, whatever, but these are very obvious, blatant lies. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Very close to when it happened, like a day or two later.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have read the book or seen the movie Safe Haven, but the whole time I was reading about this case, that's all I could think about, because she was a woman who was abused by her police officer husband, who also was an alcoholic, who drank vodka from a water bottle, and I was like, whoa, this is just very weird. Like, so many similarities here. Again, that just shows the fact that this is such a common occurrence. Again, such a super, super sad case, but thank you so much to the listener who brought this case to our attention, because as you guys know, we really want to highlight those cases that don't get a lot of coverage, because we want to make sure that all victims' names and stories are heard and told. So we really appreciate you letting us know about this case.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always up for a case that I've never heard of and a case that you guys have probably never heard of, because it's important.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
Okay, my perk of the week is I did what a lot of people did this week, and I watched Crime Scene Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel.
Oh, uh-huh.
It was very, very good. I thought it was very well done. I watched it with Kevin. Kevin is, like, neutral about true crime, I guess. Like, he doesn't dive deep in. He's not like, please don't ever listen to that. He's kind of in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And this one, it's a very interesting twist and turn. So he liked that kind of mystery of it. He was hilarious during it, because it would be, like, different theories that are just, like, the outlandish ones. And he'd look at me and be like, please tell me you don't believe that. Like, please tell me you don't think her disappearance was, a government conspiracy because of tuberculosis. I was like, no, I promise.
Wait, Kevin, you don't believe that? Hold
on. And one thing that cracked me up, because they showed just a lot of different, like, comments and stuff on videos and stuff. And one was just this person that was like, hello, she was murdered, with no, like, punctuation. And Kevin just found that hilarious, because it was like this random nobody on the internet. Which reminds me, I also did want to bring up in my little perk of the week here, when I was watching this, it made me remember, especially in unsolved cases, even if you think someone did it, don't harass them, because they might not have done it. Like, don't send death threats and get all their accounts suspended when there's no actual evidence that they did it. Just my little PSA here at the end. Don't cyberbully people. It's not a good look.
Because you're so mad about someone else's life being ruined, but now you're turning around and ruining someone's life that may have had nothing to do with it. So, yeah, please don't.
Yeah, please don't do that. I just wanted to say that. Like, be nice on the internet. Be kind to people. Even if you're like, I 100% think this person did it. Like, don't harass them. Don't send them death threats. Don't, like, just chill. Let the police do their job. I know they fuck it up a lot, but let them handle it. There's probably something they know if that person's not arrested yet.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So, my perk of the week is going to be kind of a two-parter, but one, I already mentioned it, just the fact that we had 3 days of like 60-degree weather with sunshine, which just does my soul so much good.
Yes,
so,
same.
So walking the dogs was not a chore because it was 20 degrees and cold, and it's like, I don't want to do this. It's like, no, I want to go outside and walk the dogs. And then we got to have longer play times, and again, I got to work out on the back deck and just get some vitamin D and some fresh air. So that was super nice. I also got some Starburst jelly beans this week, so that's been a big perk of the week because I love some Starburst jelly beans. And I texted Courtney wondering if Instacart would judge me if I just ordered the minimum requirement of jelly beans to be delivered to my house. But then the next day I was coming home and I was like, oh, there's a CVS. I'm going to go get some Starburst jelly beans. So I did, and they are delicious, and they make me very happy. And that's that.
Yeah, Kevin loves those, but he's trying to not eat as much candy. So he told me, he's like, don't buy me anything. I'm like, okay, I won't buy you any candy.
Yeah, Andrew told me to hide them because, okay, so they were buy one, get one free, so I had to get two, but then I was leaving, and then I saw the Reese eggs because Easter's coming up, so, like, I had to get two of those, too, because they were buy one, get one free. So anyway, I got a lot of candy, and so Andrew was like, please hide those from me, because he's trying to be healthier and eat better, and can't have, like, a handful of jelly beans after dinner, will eat the whole bag of jelly beans after dinner. So
Yeah.
he's like, hide them from me, and I was like, okay, but, like, where am I going to hide 4 bags of candy? So I, like, put it in a bag, put it behind a bunch of cans in the pantry, and then he finds it that night, and he's like, great hiding spot. And I'm like, I've seen you look for things in the fridge. This was a great hiding spot. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
he finds what he wants to find.
exactly. I'm like, you have literally been like, where's the ketchup? And it's literally behind the milk. One item you have to move to find it, but then I stuff it all the way back behind these cans and you find it immediately. Like, okay. So
Yeah, Kevin has that problem where he just, like, can't stop eating. Like, he loves Skittles, especially. Like, he's like, I just can't stop. I love them. And he's like, I gotta stop. I'm getting older. I gotta, eat. I gotta be a little healthier and not eat so much candy.
I do find that putting them in a container helps versus just let me take the bag to the couch with me, because that never ends well. So I'm like, let me put a few in a container and then go to the couch. And then when I'm done eating them, I don't want to get back up off the couch. So I'm like, I'll just stay here and not eat anymore.
See, that's why Kevin just grabs a handful, but then he'll get up like 7 times from the couch to go get more handfuls.
He doesn't mind those trips.
Because I told him, I was like, maybe you should get the little individual packed ones where it's like a serving size. And he's like, I'll just eat 4 of them. It doesn't help me. I was like, okay.
I mean, I have been there where I'm like, oh, I got like the mini Reese eggs, so I can eat 8, right? That's how it works.
It's like in that movie, like, how many mini burgers make one big burger? I've eaten a lot.
Oh, gosh. So if you guys want to tell us about your candy obsessions or things that you like and your perks of the weeks, all the good things, you can find us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod. You can find us on Twitter at CAF Crimes Pod. That's CAFF Crimes Pod. You can find us on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, or you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. If you feel so inclined and you want some extra episodes because you just love hearing us talk and you want some bonus goodies and you want to hang out with us virtually and all those cool things, you can go on over to patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes. We are trying really hard to get monthly bonus episodes out. So we do have several in the works already, but we do have several that are already up there. So if you pledge today, you immediately get access to all the old ones and then any new content that comes out as well.
And if you would like, we are still doing our Apple Reviews giveaway. So once we get to 50 reviews, we will select someone to win a pin, a sticker, and a $10 gift card to the coffee shop of their choice. It can be Dunkin', it can be Starbucks, it can be local, it can be, I don't care, wherever you want. But just go and do that, please. Just leave some identifying information so we know it's you. And hopefully someday, semi-soon, we'll reach that goal. Tell your friends. They don't have to listen. Just leave a review.
Exactly.
And we'll give them free stuff. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And and don't commit a crime.